So once again, we're just getting started and we had some warm-up slides. Jackie is going to put them up on our screen. So we wanted people to think about, if you were to bite into an apple, which teeth might you use? So we're talking about our front teeth, our kind of side pointy teeth, or our back teeth, our molars that are kind of wider and flat. And it looks like most people are saying, you know, hey, I would bite into with my front teeth. And some people have different ways, and that's great. There's different ways to eat apples, and you might use different teeth at different times. You might also, depending on if you have any teeth missing for the moment, because you have new ones growing in, you might also use different teeth.
Yeah. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. We're really excited to start our second session together. Well, I'm so excited to see all y'all again. It's really great.
It's been fantastic. We've been thinking a lot about Spooktacular science and the things that we did last week, and we've been noticing a lot of the work that you all have been doing as well. But let's just take a moment and let's think back to the different things that we did last week, just to kind of warm up and refresh our memories a bit.
Well, remember, we heard a story from our scientist Mo here at the California Academy of Sciences, and she told us a story about some hikers that found a dead animal and saw kind of the bones and the flesh, and we were able to bring it back to the Academy.
And then when it came back to the Academy, we started to think about this question of, how do we get bones clean and into our museum? So we walked through that pathway of looking at our prep lab, figuring out that we use beetles.
Yep. And then we used a solution to help kind of get it nice and white.
And then we put the bones in the freezer in order to make sure there were no bad bugs getting into the Academy.
And then once it's all nice and clean, we actually brought it into our collections, and we had the opportunity to actually look a little bit closer at this mystery skull.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because one of the things that we noticed, and we kind of left everyone with, as we practiced that scientific sketching, but then we also noticed that there were some people who were able to go on and help add to some of the observations they made of the skull sketches or things they saw out in nature.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your sketches and the things that you saw out in the wild.
Yeah, and we look forward to hearing more from those of you who have had a chance to go out and do things, and we're going to have more opportunities to share on our Padlet in the future. But thank you. This is just a small smattering. There were so many amazing things that really came through.
And some great stories. Thank you so much for some of those writings too.
Yeah, so we also noticed that after our last session, there were a ton of questions that people asked. There were really amazing questions. And so one of the things that we decided to do is we wanted to go through and look at all the questions people submitted, and we chose the top 3 questions that popped up, and we put it back to you today to figure out what's the thing that you want to get the most answers to.
And it looks like by quite a few votes, we are going to answer the question, what is the oldest, the biggest, and the smallest and rarest skull we have in our collections?
Those are some really great questions. So we're going to take a look at those pictures in just a moment. And for those of you who voted for the other questions, which are really good, we're going to figure out how to have some time to answer those. But we're going to start off with this big question. So let's take a look and see what we can find out. Now, Jackie did a little bit of research.
Yeah, so we were able to find our biggest skull, and that is our blue whale skull. And in fact, this one, you can see it next to a grown person, and they're probably about 6 feet tall, so you can really see how big it really is. And this one is actually on our museum floor, where you can see it yourself in our California coast section.
Yeah, and so if you have an opportunity to come visit us in San Francisco and Golden Gate Park, you too can come into the museum and be able to see it. And good news for those of our friends who are from San Francisco, our museum is reopening to the public in 10 days. So we hope you have an opportunity to come explore.
Yeah. All right, our smallest skull is a hummingbird, and you can see it's actually in the palm of my hand. Really, really small.
That's tiny. You must have to be really careful when you hold that one, Jackie.
I do. I have to be really careful. And
now,
then,
Jackie, there's two more types of skulls, I think.
Yeah.
The oldest and rarest.
Yep. And this one actually is one skull itself. And so it's our oldest because it's from 3.3 million years ago.
Whoa.
And it's our rarest because this is a skull of a 3-year-old child found in Ethiopia. So one of our scientists here at the California Academy of Sciences, Dr. Zerai, he actually went to Ethiopia with a team, and they were able to find this skull, and its nickname is Salam. Now, we don't actually have this skull here at the Academy because we left it in Ethiopia because that's where it's found. So we want to make sure that those really important finds we leave in the country that we found them.
Yeah, but it tells us a lot about how humans have evolved over time and the story of what has been going on around our world.
Yeah, and the cool thing is we have a replica of that skull here at the California Academy of Sciences. So not the real thing, but it looks just like it.
And that way you can kind of get up close and take a look at it. So if you go to our African hall when you're here, you can check that out too.
All right. Well, we answered one of the questions. I'm really excited for all those questions that came in. You all had some really good questions, but I am ready to dive into today. What about you?
Absolutely. I'm super excited to dive in. So, Jackie, last time we looked at how bones get into a museum, and then we started to look at how scientists really kind of work with them. And so today, what I thought we would do is we would talk about how to be science detectives and how to get skulls to talk to us. So put on your detective hat.
Okay. I got my hat.
Great.
I'm going to be a detective. I got my magnifying glass.
Yep.
But you said skulls talk to us?
Yeah. So, just like a private investigator or a detective, you have to do a lot of work to pull kind of clues and hints out of things. So we try and get our skulls to talk to us.
Okay. I've never done this before, so I'll try it. How am I going to talk to a skull?
Hello, Jackie.
Oh, hello, Mr. Skull.
How are you today?
I'm doing okay. So I heard you can actually talk to me.
Well, kind of. Obviously, I'm not a very good ventriloquist, but we can get skulls to talk to us by looking for those clues and looking really up close. So they don't actually say things, but we can start to pull their stories of how they lived, how they died, by looking really closely at skulls.
Okay, well, let's practice that. So let's figure out what this is and really look at clues to help us figure out what this skull is. So I'm going to look and see if there's things that I notice that are similar to maybe things I've seen before.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and have our fellow science detectives do the same. Go ahead and either write down, or you can tell us by telling us through the screen, or being able to write that down. What do you notice about this skull?
What does it remind you of? What are things that look familiar? What looks strange?
So Lindsay, I'm starting to notice kind of the teeth. They kind of remind me of the teeth that I have. I see front teeth. And then I also see kind of those back teeth.
Yep.
All right.
And if we look at those teeth, I mean, we can kind of see some familiar things. We can kind of think about, you know, some people, and they might say like, okay, well, this looks like a human teeth, but teeth are really interesting because sometimes we might think we know what a skull is, but we don't necessarily, we need to kind of piece together these pieces. So like, for example, if we're looking at this skull, what do we notice about these teeth? Like, what could they be used for? And here, you know what, let me put it under my lab camera. That way we can look at it a little bit closer.
All right, sounds good. So while we're waiting, go ahead and use your tongue and feel around your mouth and your teeth. We can feel kind of the shapes. Maybe think about what they're used for.
Yeah, so Jackie, what do you notice about the shapes of the teeth?
So I noticed these kind of back teeth, they're kind of flat. And that makes me think that they're really good for kind of grinding down food.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm starting to notice kind of those front teeth. Those are kind of like really flat, but when I use my tongue, it's kind of sharp. So
yeah,
I think
they're kind of skinny, almost like knife-like.
yeah, so I think those are really good for kind of like cutting with like knives are, like cutting into something.
Yeah, so why don't we, I have an experiment for you.
Okay.
Do you have a snack with you by any chance?
I actually do.
Okay, great. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about how you use your teeth and what they're kind of good for. So go ahead, take a bite out of your apple. How would you eat your apple? Okay, so I noticed that it looks like you were able to kind of just slice through with your front teeth, but I don't see you chewing with your front teeth right now. Yeah, so how would you describe that motion back there?
So again, like you saw, I definitely sliced in with my front teeth, and then I kind of moved that apple towards the back of my mouth. And I kind of was chewing down, and I was also a little bit kind of grinding it down so that it got into smaller pieces, so then I could actually swallow that apple.
Excellent. So, you know, one of the things that we can tell about looking at our skull's teeth is we can tell a little bit of how they use it, and that helps us learn a little bit about maybe what they eat, what they do. And I know that some of you know this looks really familiar, and yes, this is a human skull. So we can kind of think from our own experiences about what that is, but we also have some other skulls that I want to do. So remember last week, we were trying to make observations about our mystery skull that Mo had found, or the hikers had found and told Mo about down on Villa Beach. And so we're going to be doing some kind of clues and some things to kind of piece that together. But I have another story. Since we don't know exactly what this one is, I have a story about ones that I do know what they are, and I thought we could look at them closely together.
Ooh, I love stories.
Okay,
right.
Great. So let's see. So here's where the story starts. The story starts at a park that's over here in San Francisco. It's called Candlestick State Park. Ooh. And it's a big area. It's right by the beach, and there's all of these bushes and things, as we can see. And so it's a super interesting place. And there are some skulls that were found there that we've identified. And so we're going to be practicing our gathering of clues by looking at those skulls. So let me go ahead and grab them off my shelf.
All right. Well, I am ready to look really closely at those skulls, and specifically maybe looking at those teeth.
Yeah, so here's what I'm going to put them back underneath the lab camera in just a moment, but we're going to take these two skulls and we're going to piece together some clues about what they ate and what they noticed. All right, so my scientist friends at home, you're going to be science detectives, so you can feel free to jot down some clues about what you see. And the way scientists think about it is they talk specifically, for example, about shapes of things that they see, details that they can describe, and then they say, this makes me think that blah, 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 blah. So let me go ahead and I'll set this up for you.
All right, well, Lindsay, that actually really sounds like what we were doing with our scientific sketching. We were looking at clues and looking at shapes of our skull. And so I think that's a great idea of using those same skills. Now, also, we only have a little bit of time together today, so I think our science detectives should concentrate, look really closely at only one skull.
Yep. So here's what we're going to do. We have two skulls. Oops, let me just adjust a little bit. We have these two skulls here, and I'm gonna just kind of slowly kind of move them around. And my scientist friends at home, I want you to kind of think about, just for a few minutes, what do you notice? And we're gonna call the skull on the right A and the skull on the left B for right now. So you can kind of check those out.
So again, you can use your science skill of drawing if you'd like. You can also do a scientific sketch. You can also just jot down some ideas, write down your ideas on a piece of paper or a pencil. Start to notice, are there things that it reminds you of? Do you see shapes that you've seen before? So now I'm kind of looking a little bit closer at those teeth and starting to notice some shapes that we saw earlier.
Yeah, there might be some things that they kind of remind you of. So if you think about the teeth that you use, you might see, for example, some of your things that are more flat and sharp and knife-like our front teeth, or you might see things that are more wide and grinding, like our back teeth. We didn't necessarily talk too much about pointy teeth, but we do have some pointy teeth. You can think about what you might use those teeth for.
Maybe like ripping?
That's a good idea. I think I do that when I'm kind of ripping into a baguette, like a piece of kind of tough bread. I like tough bread.
Yeah, I happen to have some dried fruit. Definitely did that the other day. Tried to rip it. It was really hard.
Yep. All right, so I'm seeing, it looks like a lot of our science friends have had an opportunity to really think about the teeth a little bit. So I mentioned that part of the mystery is not just only identifying what a skull is, but it's also identifying how they live in their ecosystem. Because when we can identify how they live in their ecosystem, it helps us understand what we can do to help those animals survive. So let's go ahead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up some pictures of some foods. And they're foods that are found in Candlestick State Park. And then I'm going to ask our friends at home, our science detectives at home, to jot down for themselves which foods they think the animals ate. So if you're thinking about skull A, that had the big pointy teeth, which foods do you think it was good at eating? If you were thinking about skull B, which is with a smaller skull, what do you think those teeth were really good at eating? So you have an opportunity to jot down your ideas for yourself. You could also click on the link that's in the chat box or comment field, and it will take you to one of our other Mentimeters so you can share your thoughts. You can either type in the number of the food that you see or the name that you see.
And Lindsay, why don't you hold up A?
Yep.
And I will hold up B so that we can kind of remind ourselves what skulls we're talking about.
All right, so here's skull A.
And I have skull B. All right, we definitely have a lot of votes coming in. That's great. Thank you, everybody, for either typing the number or the letter. Or sorry, the name of the food.
Yep. And Jackie, I wonder if you could share what people are thinking. Maybe we can share side by side, or if that doesn't work, I'll stop my share.
Actually, let's try one thing real quick. right, so I think we can't share side by side, but we can definitely look a little bit closer at what are people saying.
Okay, so I stopped sharing so you can put yours up.
Great. So looks like a lot of people are saying meat or that rabbit.
Yeah, for skull A.
For skull A, so your skull. And let's go ahead and see what people said for skull B.
Oh, I see a lot more people talking about plants, berries.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm noticing that there's not a lot of kind of meat on this one, because yeah, I don't see any kind of those big canines, those big sharp teeth on my skull.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this animal doesn't eat any meat.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And I'm glad that you had an opportunity to kind of think about that. Now, I mentioned that when we're looking at our skulls, that these are skulls that we might already know. So they might remind you of different things. But I want to go back to something that Mo was telling us. So a lot of people had the question of like, how our collection used to do science. So I'd love to hear from Mo just for a moment so we can hear about that. And then we're going to work on figuring out exactly what these things are.
And that's because, let's say a researcher, like an archaeologist, is working down in San Francisco digging the new Trans Bay terminal. And they find a little bone like this, which is a scapula. And they say, oh, this looks like a sea otter scapula. I wonder if there were sea otters in San Francisco before the city was built or when Native Americans were here in the city. And they come to the collection with their scapula and they pull scapulas from several different species that they think it might be. It could be a raccoon, or it could be a dog, or maybe a cat, or maybe a southern sea otter. And so they compare those scapula and then they determine which species it is.
All right. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to be comparing our bones, our skulls, to the ones that we just found in the collection. So, oops. Let's go ahead and just take a moment and let's look at those skulls again. I'm going to hold up skull A.
And I'll hold up skull B.
And we can compare these skulls and see what they are. Now, I know some people were thinking that this skull A looked a lot like a dog skull.
Mm.
And when we look at that and we look at kind of the details and we're noticing the patterns of teeth, I can see, I think it might belong to maybe the coyote.
Yeah, and I'm noticing for skull B, that there's kind of two that look really similar because of this kind of like shape, this kind of curled shape. It's either a jackrabbit or a porcupine, and I noticed that for the jackrabbit, it has kind of this little spot right here that goes out and then kind of makes a V shape. Where on the porcupine, it more looks like a bump.
Uh-huh.
So I'm thinking that this is a jackrabbit.
Cool. That's awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. It turns out a lot of our science detectives were correct. We have a coyote and we have a rabbit. And when we think about what coyotes eat, it's a lot of meat, a lot of small animals, such as ants, frogs, rabbits.
Jackrabbits?
Yep. They do eat some berries and things like that, but it's a lot of meat.
Yeah, where for our jackrabbit, we saw that there was lots of bushes in this area. They love to eat the bushes and berries. And so this animal is definitely a plant eater.
Right. So let's take that information. And what I want to do is I'm going to put our mystery skull that we looked at last time back up on our lab camera. And for our science detectives at home, what I would love for you to do is to get out the sketch that you made last time, and we're going to keep adding information to it. So we might be able to look at the teeth in a whole different way and really think about, what are these teeth good for? Not my teeth, but the skull's teeth. All right, so let me go ahead and bring that up. Go ahead and find your sketch right now, and then we'll just add to it. So here's my sketch from last time, and here's my skull. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the skull in a way where we can kind of see those shapes of the teeth. And so once again, one of the things we can do is we can kind of look for shapes. So I'm noticing these are kind of like wide circles, and I can count them. And then there's some really pointy teeth. And we can also add in more descriptions. So like, or things that we think, or questions that we have. So like, what do you think these wide teeth would be good at? What do you think these sharp, pointy teeth might be good at eating?
So Lindsay, when I'm looking at that, I see those sharp teeth and I'm thinking it probably is going to be a meat eater.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I noticed the sharp teeth too, but then I also noticed these really big wide teeth. And that makes me think like, well, that's what like animals that grind up plants have, like in their back teeth.
Yeah, like ours.
Right, or like if we look at the jackrabbit, you see how those are wider?
Yeah, I'm noticing that too. Oh, well, it's good to make sure that we look at all of the teeth and think about that.
Yeah. So Jackie, I'm just going to turn it on its side right there. People can have a different view of it. It looks like from the process, you know, that we just used with Mo, where she was describing how to use collections to find things. It sounds like we maybe need to go and do a little bit of research on the collections and the food types that were found, where our mystery skull was found.
Yeah, I think we have some homework for next week. Okay.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to for our next session, really diving in and trying to figure out, what is this skull? What did it eat? How did the animal maybe die? Why is it purple? I still don't know why the skull kind of has some purpley colors on it.
Yeah, that's been bugging me as well. So I think it would be great if we have everybody kind of look a little bit closer at maybe the environment that it lives in, and then also maybe explore the teeth a little bit more on your own. So again, on our student site, you are going to have the opportunity to do a couple of different activities that can explore these things.
And just like last time, at the end of our session, we collected questions that you had, and we would love to answer more questions. Some of the questions we didn't get a chance to answer today, we're going to post on our website so you have an opportunity to go look at those. But for right now, here is our last link. And you might need to refresh your browser if you're on YouTube. And if you can go in and you can give us some feedback and some thoughts, tell us what you really liked and what your new questions are. We're going to try and do our best to answer all of those next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.